Each of these four faculties of mind, loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity, there's something that, as Buddhist scholars looked at it, called a near enemy and a far enemy. The near enemy is a much subtler thing. It's something that is sort of on the way to fully understanding equanimity. The far enemy is obviously the total opposite. So the far enemy of equanimity is total agitation, blowout, if you like, that they call in the text greed, but really it's that really hyper-agitated worry mind. And I know you're looking at somebody who was a worry ward, really big-time worry ward for a long time. So I know that it can contribute slowly to the downgoing of that level of agitation and worry. And the other thing that throws us into, that the ancient texts don't talk about, but is very clear, when there's a lot of agitation, when there's no equanimity, what happens when you associate with people is you need approval. And you become self-critiquing. I grew up in the dance world. You never got anything right. I mean, I was in the ballet company here in the National when I was a kid. The whole part of that training was that anything was never right, you know, it just wasn't. Darling, your arms, darling, they're not in line, darling. Now, I was past the days when they took canes to us, thank goodness, but you may have that in your past. So that feeling of being always on edge and always needing approval. People who regrettably have grown up in deeply abusive families often fall into that category too. So equanimity is hard for them to find because they are looking for the shadow to come out in other people. So resentment can come out of that when there's no equanimity as well. Well, that person has it really good. Here am I, slugging along doing this in this awful situation, but that person over there, look at that. They've got a BMW in the driveway. They've got a cottage in Muskoka. They've got, whatever it is, they've got a place in the Florida Keys. And what have I got? I work so hard. So you can build this unpleasant scenario, and this is where our habits of mind start to get us going and don't let us go. And we chew, you know, that lovely word ratiocinate. We're like a rat on a wheel, around and around and around, and equanimity is nowhere to be found. So the development of equanimity through some of the work that we're going to do today starts to help to get that rat off the wheel, to find a way to get a break from that whirling mind. So that's the far enemy. The near enemy, this subtler one, is unknowing, where you just don't pay attention, or you just don't know, or what I sometimes say, where you're completely blindsided by something. Comes in from left field, there you are bobbling along through your life, and all of a sudden, wham, something happens, and your equanimity goes. Now maybe it's illness, maybe it's a rupture of a love affair, you know, maybe it's a sudden accident, all sorts of things. Or maybe you've just been enjoying your life and ignoring the vices and virtues of the people around you. Maybe you haven't been celebrating somebody. Somebody here who's a parent may know that sometimes they'll get a shock. Their child will turn to them and say, "You don't appreciate me." And as a parent, you think, wait a minute, aren't I always telling them how much I value them? So, but somehow that's not getting through. So it's an unknowing. You've missed something. The other near enemy is is faults. Our own faults, clearing faults in a situation, helping others to clear their faults, just stepping aside, turning aside. When we do that, we become vulnerable because we're doing it with hope, hoping that it won't happen, hoping the dire thing won't happen. Last night in the class, I was talking about a particular student who'd said something that clearly meant to me that she'd totally missed the boat in terms of a piece of teaching that she'd been given. She'd been around for quite a while, and somebody at the break said, "So what did you say to her?" And I said, I said nothing. I was so taken aback. I remember thinking, I hope she's heard what she just said. And that was an unknowing. As a teacher, I should have pointed it out. But I was raised to be very polite, and sometimes I make that mistake. It's the unknowing. It's just not being totally present. And politeness sometimes is a cover for being afraid. Sometimes it's a very wonderful thing because it makes the world a nicer place to live in, to be polite. So that's the classic definition, and in the classic text it says the marks of success are zeal at the beginning. You're going to learn to be equanimous or equanimitous. You're going to practice these practices. And by gum, by next week, you're going to be so equanimitous, water off a duck's back, nothing's going to bother you at all. Of course, it's not going to work that fast. Sorry. I wish it did. But suppression of the hindrances is called the middle. Now that means either, if you're Theravada, and you're doing the first work, or you're of quite a crude mentality, which very few people who come here are, but it means really putting a lid on stuff, really halting yourself from negative patternings. Better for them to dissolve. They will diminish gradually if you practice what I call practice the pause. Just before you're bound into a pattern that you're familiar with, you just practice a pause. You bring the attention to the nostril edge, and you just take 3 long, slow breaths before you speak. Now, it will provide a slightly odd speech pattern for a little while, but it is a way to get started. It's the way I was trained and I used for a long time, to try to refine my speech patterns so that they were appropriate. So hindrances dissolve. This is the middle layer. The agitation and worry will slowly dissolve. And absorption is the end. To be able within a breath or two to find this clear and open state, to be present. And then no matter what is going on, you are not closed off to it, and you're not reactive to it. You're right there. So that's a bit of lecture about equanimity.